Jubilee came out with a video titled Feminists versus Men's Rights, and I thought it was pretty interesting. A good portion of the viewers thought that some of the people on the panel were misrepresenting certain ideas, partly things I'm looking at you. And of course, there was another individual by the name of Ariel, who is this guy here, but we're going to talk about him soon. There were a couple of critiques that I did have. For instance, oftentimes I found the people on the panel comparing each other's problems, and it was kind of more or less a competition for them.
Why are more laws against men, though? I mean, there's more laws in the U.S. that are disfavored to men than women. Why is that?
Like which laws? Like the inconsequential draft?
No.
Like what laws?
Access to certain healthcare programs. Prostate cancer, the biggest killer of non-smoking men, is not covered under the ACA.
Okay, women in like half the country don't even have a right to like bodily autonomy, don't have access to effective contraception. You're comparing amount of rights.
You compared them. Wait, you compared those two issues.
You literally just said men don't have more rights than women.
I don't know if my ears are on airplane mode, but it almost sounded to me like the men's right activist was the one who drew that dichotomy between men and women.
I mean, there's more laws in the U.S. that are disfavored to men than women.
Like, why would you draw that comparison, man? You know, like when you're trying to win over a group of people and you want them to support your cause, I think the last thing you want to do is you want to draw a dichotomy or a separation between groups, and you want to convince the other side like we have more problems than you guys. You know, like, that's not the way to go. Even if that was true, I still wouldn't even go down that route. Yeah, but there's no real reason to make this a competition. I mean, it's not like Guinness World Records has a category for stupid, because if it did, I'd be on that panel trying to break that record. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, just don't make this a competition, because we need each other. We absolutely need each other. Obviously, because women can vote now, so we need their vote to help pass policy that could potentially be beneficial, not just for us, but obviously for men. Now, I want to go over this clip here as well, because I think the rhetoric that is being used in this particular conversation is a bit detrimental to men's rights. And of course, feminists as well, which I'll get into the feminist aspect soon. But in terms of like men's right, I think that in order for men's rights to be supported properly, I think that rhetoric like this should not be uttered. And you'll see what I'm talking about.
You guys are referring to violence like it belongs to men.
Most of, especially serious violence, like most of the women that are getting killed in domestic violence, yes, they are.
Women are 1 out of 3 women in the U.S. were victim of domestic violence.
Now, this particular rhetoric has the unintended consequence of influencing people to minimize men's issues. When you hear that men are the majority of perpetrators, that tends to influence people to think, well, men kind of put themselves in that position, so why should we care about men's rights? But the problem is that even though they use these kind of words like, you know, men are the majority, it almost makes it sound like it's the majority of the male population that are committing these crimes. Instead, I think that there should be a distinction, or maybe even keeping it neutral, because only a small percentage of men are actually the perpetrators or committing the crimes. The majority of the population, the male population, are actually hardworking. They're going out there, they have their families, protecting their families. They're doing all sorts of things that are contributing to the society. I think that it's best to find a way to properly articulate that so it doesn't have that unintended consequence of minimizing men's issues. Unlike this guy here, Ariel, who likes to minimize men's issues and just uplift women's issues, which I think that it's important that we uplift these issues, but don't just be one-sided, man. And I want to go ahead and move on to this guy. So let's go ahead and move on.
In my personal experience, men only talk to women they want to sleep with. I have this thing I say, I feel like saying that like men have feelings is kind of like saying all lives matter, because men only ever bring up their problems directly after women bring up theirs. So it just sounds dismissive. I feel like kind of what I alluded to earlier, women do so much emotional labor for men. Men don't do anything for women.
He's really making my blood boil. I feel like if I was to donate blood, they would have to use oven mitts, because he's making me rage, you know? I feel like any word he speaks is the password to unlock my rage mode. Because it's almost as if his prime objective is to only go into this just stomping on men. Now, I know that that's, like, I've heard, I mean, this kind of crosses the line, dude. Like, I don't know, man. Maybe he's trying to come as someone who is neutral, trying to be a realist, but this is far from being a realist. If anything, this paints him as incredibly ignorant. And you could tell that some of the people on the panel were not having it, because there was a moment where he was trying to kind of interject and give his opinion, but everybody was just kind of, they were treating him like jazz, where he was just background music.
I think that
It's your
whole
definition of therapy that matters too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the men that I know, and again, I've dealt with thousands of them, it is not done through a psychologist.
They're actually-
it is done through physical activity.
There actually is
Like, you
evidence
look
for
at-
that.
And I think that both are necessary. I think that seeking out a professional
Depends
is,
on the person.
is
Might work for
something
you,
should
might not work for me,
That's
right?
fair.
And you need to actually open up when you talk to
That was
people.
actually the thing I was going to say
But you
too.
always do. You know, the best conversation I've ever had is when somebody just punched me in the face.
Damn, they ignored him pretty hard, man. If anything, I started doubting his existence. For the rest of the video, I started thinking that his name was Patrick. Ignoring him definitely did damage, man. And honestly, I don't think that Jubilee did him any favors. I felt like Jubilee needed to reintroduce him. And just in case you forgot his name is something. I just don't know what it is. And before I end the video, I want to go ahead and just talk about Patrick. I keep calling him Patrick. I just want to talk about one more thing that he said that I thought was, pretty interesting.
Do you think that there's masculinity?
No, it's not a real concept. Femininity is not a real concept.
Aren't you a men's rights activist?
I'm a men's rights activist, but that's just the other same side of that's the same side. What's it called? Same side of feminism. I believe in destroying the patriarchy. I believe in destroying the ideas of gender. I agree with everything you're saying because the ideas that you guys are talking about with how men are emasculated, not allowed to cry, or people think their emotions aren't valid. I agree with all that. That's not women's fault, and those aren't even like masculine traits. These are all just ideas that were just fed to us by the patriarchy, and we need to destroy it.
First off, I just want to go ahead and say that he said that we should destroy the patriarchy. Listen, man, there's just, I've tried to research to see whether that could be a thing that is possible. And the only thing that shows up is egalitarian, which tells me that there is probably no such thing as completely destroying the patriarchy or even a matriarchy for that matter. Egalitarian is just a really unrealistic balance that is probably never going to happen, obviously, because I'm sure that you guys have heard, if not, let me introduce to you guys this concept called the Hydra effect, where if you solve one problem, 10 other problems end up showing up. And that's kind of how it usually is. You solve one problem, unfortunately, there is unintended consequences that spawn from that. I feel like we're always going to be chasing this balance that is probably unrealistic, but we can always get there as close as possible. Whenever I read about eliminating the patriarchy, or even in some instances, a matriarchy, I'm always reminded of this analogy where when it comes to reaching absolute zero, we can never really reach it, but we can get as close as possible to it. And I feel like eliminating the patriarchy is something similar to that. Like, we can never actually ever eliminate it, or even if it was a matriarchy, we'll never be able to eliminate it, but we can get close to the point where we will still have unintended consequences, but those are some of the costs that we're willing to live with, so long as the majority of the population is comfortable with the policies. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to just go ahead and go over this. I thought it was pretty interesting. Yeah, those are some of my thoughts. That's all I have for you guys. And yeah, hopefully you guys learned something today.